Hello, my name is Alan Miller, and today I will be doing a skill breakdown of the overhead goalkeeper throw used in the sport of soccer. So on the left, I'd like to show you a full speed version of a proper throw. The four components that you will see are the preparation, the wind up, the actual throw itself, as well as the release and follow through. As we can see here, um, in this slow motion video, um, my goalkeeper began in a proper kind of preparation phase or position. If I'm looking at her feet, her legs, and her hips, as well as her arms and hands and her overall posture, she is in an athletic position as if she had just caught the ball or collected the ball from a shot. As she moves into the wind up phase, she steps forward with her left foot. She opens up her hips, and that is kind of the emphasis here in the lower limbs. As we look at her upper body, she's got her left arm kind of in the direction of the throw. She's opened up her shoulders. She has the ball curled between her wrist, forearm, and her hands. And as you can see, her whole body posture has a forward momentum going into the throw. As she comes up over the top, her non-dominant arm comes down towards the ground. Um, her shoulder rotates very nicely here. One thing I really appreciate is her effort in keeping this elbow rather straight. She will also be closing her hips here, as well as rotating her knee. She does have a tendency to pick up her back foot, which is not the worst thing in the world. However, you can tell as she closed her hips, closed her knee, kind of rotated that foot, she's really closing her body to put the force behind the ball. And then for the final stage would be this release point, which again, even in slow motion, is kind of hard to catch. But she starts to straighten out her wrist here. The ball begins to roll down her hand, and then ultimately it rolls off of her pointer finger and her middle finger, which will give it kind of that backspin that we're looking for. So again, this is a great example of what the throw should look like. We've got the step forward, the follow through. All of her body is moving together to put the power behind that throw. So those are the four phases that we're looking for in a proper throw. So kudos to her as a 10-year-old goalkeeper. She's a little bit further advanced in her throwing mechanics than our next I don't want to say victim, but our next player. As she goes through this motion, we can kind of pick out the things that she might be missing or lacking. So as she gets set, she's in a goalkeeper stance. She was having a harder time buying in for this video making, um, but her knees would be bent, feet, shoulders width apart. She's looking at the soccer ball, which is always a good thing when you're trying to catch. As she steps. She goes with her right foot first, which is all right as she gets prepped, but then she does use her non dominant foot, which is exactly what we'd like. She leads with her non dominant arm here, kind of in the direction of the throw. Her knee is already twisted. And if you notice, her hips are kind of staying closed in this wind up phase. So, again, her preparation phase was good, but as she transitions into that wind up phase, I'm noticing some difficulties she's having with opening her hips as well as getting her knees angled in the proper direction. She also has not turned this back shoulder nearly as much as our previous goalkeeper. Um, as she charges up here to make the throw, her elbow starts off very bent. Here, she does have the ball pinched between her forearm and her hand, which is great. But as we progress into the next motions, she doesn't swing the ball down nearly as far, which is the reason why her elbow or it's a result of her elbow not being bent properly. And then as she continues through this throw, she kind of takes on the look of a softball or a baseball thrower, or even a football for that matter. She's rotating her shoulders forward, um, but she's got her elbow doing a lot of this work, a lot of this strain of this relatively heavy ball um, as she goes through that motion. So that would be the throwing motion itself. And then if we look at her release, she's kind of pushing this ball rather than letting it roll off of her fingers. And actually, she kind of rotates her fingers around the ball, creating kind of a side spin as she follows through here. Um, I know we cannot see that the spin on the ball necessarily, but she is lacking kind of that backspin. It's got a side spin to it. Again, these girls and their very flexible elbows, it's kind of gross to look at. But as she follows through, her arm rotates across her body rather than in a forward direction, as our first goalkeeper did. Um, she finishes with her body kind of turned away from the throw. Um, and so these are all things that um, I addressed with her shortly after this video before we took the next. Some of the things we spoke about were the very first position here, where she is collecting the ball. Um, I asked her to lower that ball down, try to keep that elbow straight. Um, we did not really speak about too much opening up the hips. It was more so trying to get this shoulder and arm motion sorted out properly to result in a better throw. So as she starts, she makes a very concerted effort. You can actually see her right shoulder sort of drop down a little bit with the ball. So she's trying to get a real low swing on this ball. Um, she then, as she's loading up, you can tell that her elbow is more straight than it had been. She does open up her shoulders here. Her hips are a little tiny bit closed, but they are more open than her last throw. As she comes over the top, um, you can see most of this motion here is coming from kind of across her chest now rather than all in her elbow as she comes up here. We were just trying to address one piece here to as not to overwhelm her, try to change too many things too fast. So with her follow through, she lets go of this ball way underneath it. So this ball actually went up and nearly touched our ceiling rather than going for distance. She got lots of height on this throw. It's a little bit difficult to see here, but it came off of her thumb and her pointer finger. Again, it has kind of a sideways and backspin on it at the same time. Um, Her momentum carries her up and over. Again, her body rotates, but her eyes are still on the ball. She closes those hips, and so she ended up doing kind of a little kick there at the end as she kind of pivots on that plant foot. So, again, this is a much better throw than what she had been doing leading up until this point. However, there are still some things that we will continue to work on as we progress. So, just one more time, here's what the ideal throw would look like for these girls, kind of in slow motion here. So, as she charges up, she does have a pretty bent elbow here, but as she reaches back, she pulls her shoulder forward, which then straightens that arm out here. Her hips are nice and open. Her vision is still going where it needs to be. She's kind of pointing in the direction of the throw with her opposite arm. And as she comes over the top, you can see kind of like that whip action as she closes her hips. The momentum comes up through the body, up through that arm, and then puts that backspin on the ball. Um, I was very impressed as I was recording her with her throws. She's made a lot of progress over the last few months as we've been working on this pretty consistently.